What's going on? Welcome to your reading, to my dark dungeon. All right. I really did such a great reading. The last one with my camera off. I'd say probably like 50% of my reading. I don't know. I'm very random. Some readings I'll do with 50%. Always at the end I'll turn the camera on, but I like to just like sit with like I don't have that many crystals, but this is the only crystal that well with this that I've ever had that like noticeably does something. Um, and yeah, I just like to meditate, and I feel weird being filmed with my eyes closed and doing, you know, weird positions. Sometimes I don't know. Whatever. Artist. I'm an artist. I'm an artist. Artists are weird. That's my excuse. So I've hidden your name. So back to back readings as always, as fucking always, with similarities. Moon square Pluto. Moon Aquarius, square Pluto. You got a lot of squares. Sun, Uranus, Neptune, Chiron. And then completely unaspected Venus, Mars, and Mercury besides the conjunction with the Sun, which doesn't even barely count. I think it does, but interesting. All right. So first question is, what is the deal with a Sun in Aries, Moon, Aquarius? Well, they both get along very well. Let's just say that. Um, basically, these are two signs that sextile each other. So, Aries is obviously all about action, independence. It's the first sign. And, it's actually you have Sun sextile, you have Sun sextile Moon, which is a really, really good one. Usually it means that parents, the two parents had like a similar, even though there are lots of squares to Sun and Moon, it usually means at least, but I kind of try to stay away from like the parent stuff because it's really hard to predict. But typically, like it means that at least like the male and the female part of your psyche, there's an alignment there, right? So, um, they're similar signs, Aquarius and Aries. They're both masculine signs. They're both about freedom. They're both about independence. There's a certain flow to each of them. And yeah. So what it typically means, as I was saying, is that there's some, there tends to be some type of flow. Let's just call it that. Um, so if you think about that, you can imagine, okay, like the parents having some level of of like a similar message that they got across to you. That's usually what it is. Usually what it is. But the moon, so Moon Aquarius is a little bit of a difficult moon sign because well, the goal of the moon, right? It's to, the moon wants to be able to feel its emotions, right? Um and or not just feel its emotions, but like regulate, like meet its emotional needs. So, when it is in this sign, Aquarius, an air sign, an air moon individual tends to have difficulties with that. There can be like an Aquarius moon, there can be a sort of aloofness there, that can make it a little bit difficult to connect with the more, with the depths. Now you do have your Mars in Cancer, so that will kind of help, but and then your South Node is in Cancer too, so that will definitely help with the water. But yeah, Aquarius moons, like, they have an emotional need to, it's very social, and they want to be there. They want to be there for humanity. And the interesting thing is that sometimes they can have very, very, like, they can be very, very, like, there can be lots of distance between them and, people that they have relationships with. But then when it comes to their, the causes they care about, there can be this real deep closeness. It's really, really interesting. Um, let's see here. So yeah, overall, like, the Aquarius moon, just, yeah, it's just, it's the difficulty. Yeah, it can be, like, I always say, there's the Cancer moon, the Aquarius moon, the same thing happens to each of them, and the Aquarius moon doesn't feel it till like 8 months later, while the Cancer moon feels it like in that moment. So that obviously could be, difficult, right? um so and there, it can also be like a tendency to apply too much logic to intellectualize emotions. So it's just, it's not, there's no such thing as a good or bad moon sign, but it's just important to know that that is a possibility, and something that's, can almost be a tendency. um But at its core, aqua moons need freedom, and they need to live a life that's very individualistic. They're here to really be them, to really, really find themselves, right? Um, find themselves in a way that is, you know, different from the conditioning. So with the squares from Sun and Mercury, the nodes in the South nodes in Cancer, so in the 10th, right? Because you have Libra rising on Spica, one of the best stars, amazing rising sign. Well, it's close to Spica. We'll see how close later. But some of the difficulty can be, like, for a Cancer South node, it can be. Well, the thing is that basically, like, a lot of times with this, there's some sort of gender imbalance from, the last lifetime to this lifetime, and um or a gender switch is what I meant to say. But, like, it can kind of feel like a imbalance, right? So um also the idea of inner life and outer life, there can be an imbalance there as well. So there's a big need to kind of find, okay, so what is the right balance, right? What is the right balance of career and, inner life, home life, spirituality, all that. um because with the node, South node in Cancer, a lot of times people with that, but it's in the 10th house of Capricorn. So when there's a flip, when I see that, right, when I see, for Libra risings, they have, like, like, they're dealing with a ton of polarities in their lifetime. So the question becomes, how to how to balance the energies out. For example, the moon the moon in Aquarius in the 5th house, it brings up the Leo Aquarius, which is about, authentic self-expression, right? Going from, like finding the balance between that authentic self-expression that's for your own personal understanding of your own creativity and for the collectives. So, and with the sun in the seventh house in Aries, right? Seventh house is the opposite sign of Libra. It's about the right balance and relationships between between one extreme of Libra being like codependence at its max, and the extreme of Aries being like I'm not willing to compromise anything at all, like too much independence, essentially. So, anyways, the yeah, so the nodal energy is really, it's speaking to like how this lifetime is like a very, very important one in getting things right. It's like the hero's journey with the sun, like the like it's almost like the life purpose in this life is kind of like overcoming something that was very difficult in the past life. So we look at the sun in Aries, square the nodes, with the Mercury in Aries, square the nodes, off in the Mercury's retrograde, then and the South Node's in Cancer, then that's probably a message that you in this life in karmically underspoke at times that you need to speak up. And when it came to finding your authentic voice, there is something. And also Cancer Capricorn axis deals with conditioning, right? So the reason you have this Aquarius moon is because in this lifetime you're really trying to move away from past life conditioning. Now, one of the biggest difficulties in your chart is that Mercury square nodes, which speaks to introjects and self-limiting beliefs that are carried on from past lives. And people who have that, they can find it very difficult. And they can have thoughts that, come from different lifetimes that really limit themselves, right? That they really limit them in terms of how much they can grow and all that, right? So they really, need to reprogram themselves. And also, like with any of the karmic, these types of karmic nodal squares, one of the most helpful things is like if you think of like any kind of self-limiting belief or internal message that you're telling yourself, you can imagine, okay, like there's like there's a karmic reason for this, like this is like something that's maybe I haven't been able to get past. And any of the core, any of like the stuff with like the like with femininity, masculinity, and inner and outer, right? Finding that balance, like this is something you've been trying to get right, because South Node and Cancer, oftentimes there's like past life tendency to, for example, let's say it's like the mother who's like really good at at painting or whatever, or like, really, really, I don't know, like really like has like all these aspirations, but has to sacrifice them all for the sake of being the mother, right? And then they kind of like, also there can be like a potential of not venturing far enough away from home physically, metaphorically. Um, but then the 10th house is the opposite. So it's really about finding like a middle ground there. So when the nodal axis is, Cancer Cap, and then Aries is the planet that you have this energy of it, and the retrograde in your chart is speaking to not having spoken up enough or spoken up too much. My thought of it being in Aries is like, okay, probably it was, that there wasn't enough, because you'd have this Aries that's very like assertive speaking, but it would take you, your first, I don't know, first part of your life. You're probably now like opening up a lot more, but sometimes with the Mercury retrograde, it can just make one way more right brained, and it's almost like from a karmic perspective, like they didn't think enough about how they wanted to like use their voice and find their voice. So they're made to be more internal and have more of an internal thought process in this at the start of this life, so they can really analyze, okay, how do I want to communicate my voice? What do I want my voice to be? And they have to watch out for like ruminating, also like the kind of like um public school kind of like setup is very, not made for the Mercury retrograde person. Doesn't mean that they can't be good at it, but sometimes like they get like messages that they're not as smart as they really are, because they are, they're way more artistic minded, more abstract, and the school is very, very overly logical for a lot of them. So, yeah, you have this Aries energy in this lifetime because you are meant to really, really be assertive and be in your own power. And through that, create, and also it's in the seventh house, so it's speaking to the relationship and the need for the correct type of relationships, the right balance in relationships. Um, and just relationships playing a massive role in your life. And also Aries, like the sun conjunct Aries, there's definitely a need being like, very close to an angle. There's definitely a need to not be overly codependent, right? Because like a lot of the life purpose can be there as a Libra rising also. But also one of the best things an Aries rising can do is work out, right? Because there's just the Aries conjunct Aries sun, Aries the asteroid, it can just create a very volcanic energy, and it can just make it so, the individual, there can be like lots of frustration, especially with the Mercury retrograde, that, the like having a way, like a physical or creative outlet is super important. And Aries is very physical, so sometimes there can be this excess fire, and they need to have a way to get it out. Um, and because all the Aries energy, and I see this quite a bit actually, it funnels into Cancer and Mars, right? Because Mars is the planet that rules the Aries energy you have. Cancer Mars is can be quite frustrated, because it can, sometimes be a little bit passive aggressive. I mean, it does give one like a very deep push towards like emotional growth and spiritual growth, and towards like having a family and caring about their family, and just being very like, you know very, very compassionate. But like it's just like really important to learn how to really communicate in an effective way, because sometimes things can boil up a little bit. But yeah, so with the squares, Moon, Venus, there can be kind of a clash between the emotions and like what one feels. um just like it can make one indecisive. It can definitely, being a Libra rising also. um so following the heart is just really important, but also just being realistic. um and Pluto square Moon is like a big time trauma marker. It often speaks of a mother, but it's not always the mother. It's just like, like just early, a lot of times it's like, some type of, usually it's maternal, but not always. But it speaks to some, like energy early on that needs to kind of be, it pushes one early on in their life into. Pluto represents the underworld. It represents death, rebirth, transformation. It's the planet ruled by Scorpio, or that rules Scorpio. So when your moon, your emotions are there, it can make the emotions, even with your moon in Aquarius, feel kind of like a Scorpio energy. Very, very moody potentially, and there's that huge need for balance, right? That huge need for letting go, because it can be. It's maybe one of the I said it's the most difficult aspect of astrology. It's either the square with Pluto or the opposition with Pluto, Moon. Um, because it just makes one usually from a very early age, um, very aware of kind of the darker side of humanity, I guess you could say. So, yeah, like as an Aquarius moon, I said the things about, it is really important for you to, to feel emotions and not repress emotions and to really, like understand that your life is not, it's not like you're so far ahead of like I don't get that, like so many men who are, like I get men, but like a lot more women than men and clients. So when I get a man, um, I always think like, they like I see a chart like this, I see like these aspects. I'm just like, all right, like, you know, this individual has a very important mission in this lifetime, and part of it probably revolved around, either some type of early trauma or just, something that really showed them the darker side of kind of human existence and reality early on, um, and kind of pushes you to grow up really fast. Let's see. And yeah, and then Chiron is conjunct the South Node in Cancer. So it's like you're a naturally past life, you're a past life um healer, right? Mm. And it's on the midheaven. So that's literally showing that like if you're doing something like psychology, any kind, like you could be someone who's made for like being like a healer. And if you're not doing that for like you know for your job, their career, like it would, like some people with Chiron MC, like any kind of healer, it could even be doctor, like they're seen by the public as that, like they have that look of the person that you would trust, and the person that in their career is midheaven planets. Like it's very common to have the, like for people with midheaven Venus to be artists, midheaven Mars can be athletes, right, things like that. Pluto, celebrities, politicians, whatever. um so yeah, um I think that like you have a lot of real karmic healing abilities, but also it speaks to how karmic your family of origin is, and the healing that's needed in that regard, in order for you to really move forward, right? So that's like the need to get past that moon square Pluto. A lot of times, like people with that, they can have like a very controlling mother, or like uh, usually it's the mother, right? Like, but I've seen times where it's the father, but a parent who's very controlling, and they need to move away from that. So and then they can also like take on like guilt and shame that's not theirs. That's another big commonality. Like any kind of negative emotion that might belong to the mother, they can take it on and just really have had to like face a lot early on that is just not, really normal for, I mean, not typical, but because of that, it pushes them into their destiny as a healer. So the sun has a lot of aspects. So the square, the sun in Aries squaring the Capricorn planets, down there in the, you know, fourth. Interesting. Because they are, yeah, I mean, the North Nodes are on the IC. So like so this makes me really think that like ancestors and your bloodline, and like like there's a huge like part of your life purpose that is connected to the bloodline. But also like yeah, like I was saying, like the Chiron and Cancer individual is here, like they're big. I have that too, right? were born a year apart, like their biggest pain is around feeling misunderstood and not, yeah, just misunderstood and not really, given what they deserve from their family of origin, so there's just pain around that and around those current relationships. But they're also, with your chart, you're the one who's here to heal this. And um a lot of my clients are the people who I see their charts, like, and like, you have the opportunity to really be the person that like stops something that's like some type of cycle in your family. So I don't know how you relate to that. But I do see that a lot, and there's different, and then like I've talked to, like the way I do my astrology, it's like I, I'm not like some idiot who makes a post about like, some, some placement that they know nothing about, right? Like I don't only research myself, like I've learned through experience and through my intuition. So like, like for example, when I'm telling you about like the thing with the mom and the dad, like that's from my experience of testing it out a bunch of clients and seeing that it doesn't always add up like that. But I've just noticed that on a psychological level, the moon square Pluto is, it's one of the most important things that you could possibly have. And there's always like, I always tell people also, and I just had my last client, she had it, I said, I want you to search on Google natal moon square Pluto. I want you to read every single article and watch videos on YouTube, because that is the, like that is so important. I'm going to tell you, aspects are king, right? So already, like with the karmic stuff, as I said, right? Like, trying to balance out the genders, like people who I've talked to who have this Capricorn Cancer axis, that is often a thing, right? And there can be some real frustration. Like I had one girl lately who said she always, and I wouldn't like necessarily say it's like it's like trans. I just think that like it can just be like, imagine if like in your last few lifetimes you were a woman, right? So it can just be a little bit of a tough transition. But it's not always tough. It could also, because like it doesn't always refer only to that theme. It could be mainly referring to like in different lifetimes, sometimes being too far on like the Cancer, like inner life, home life scale, and then sometimes being too far on the Capricorn outer life, material kind of like. So it's like, how do you? It's like really about finding the balance. But the fact that the North Node's on the IC is saying that like the IC is the childhood, so you're meant to really go deep into your childhood, and you have North Node conjunct Neptune, so it's really really going into mysticism as well. And the fact that the South Node is opposite your North Node is saying that you're like any of like if you don't heal the family wounds, that is ultimately like the thing that can keep you the furthest back from achieving your highest destiny. The North Node obviously is like the metaphoric mountain you're trying to climb in this lifetime, right? That you have, that you haven't really climbed in past ones, or just like where you're at right now, where you're trying to get to. And South Node's been there, done that, which isn't a bad thing. It's just, yeah. So there's a lot of been there, done that with Cancer. So you're someone who's definitely yeah, definitely a healer, definitely someone who can put people at ease. And through your own experiences, you're able to understand people at different levels, right? That's like why people who I think are like meant to be healers, whether it's like, at certain periods of their life, everyone at their own period, have these aspects, right? Because like the only way you can really, really understand someone else, um, what they're going through is, or like the best way is that, have gone through something similar yourself. So, um, so okay, really important. So yeah, the Neptune square of the sun is very, very important because it can create an energy, right? Where, you know, it can create an identity crisis, and it can create sort of a fog around the individual and their knowledge and understanding and determination of who they are, what they represent, right? So it can also speak to like some type of fog and confusion in terms of the relationship with the father. Sometimes it's the father that wasn't present. But it really just depends. Like really depends. And oh, Esme's here. I'll show this part. Yeah, help me, Esme. I don't know if you see my Instagram or not, but this cat is like actually magic. Okay. Do the thing where you look at the chart, Esme, and tell me what I'm supposed to look at. The Mars in Cancer? Thank you. You always meow when you really know it. She like looked down, then she looked at the straight at the Mars. So it's the Mars, Esme. I need to try again. Look, do it again. Second time she looked at the Mars. Hmm. Thank you. Yeah, Esme. So, yeah. So Esmond seems to think you're Mars, you're oh, it's because it's unaspected. That's interesting. So, yeah, Venus and Mars are unaspected. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Eh, no, Venus is opposite Pluto. Why does it not show that? Definitely counts. 7 degrees. Yeah. So Mars is unaspected. So it just has like a free reign. So it just makes one very, yeah, it's like you really have to ground yourself to make sure that you don't do things that you regret. Um, Hold on. All right. So yeah. So when you have Sun square Neptune, there's definitely a need to dive into spirituality and dive into service or anything creative, artistic, anything that yeah, like Neptune, like so like one of the best things you can do. Also, you have to really watch out for energy vampires and just the fact that there's like for someone who has Neptune aspect their sun, they need to really, really make sure that they spend time alone, because they can kind of uh unconsciously take on traits that aren't theirs or like people can influence them, like they can be sometimes influenced. It's not like it's just like the need, like if this person doesn't there, it can make someone global if they pay attention and they have mindfulness in their life, they can be extremely psychic, and extremely intuitive, right? So it's kind of like that. But the big thing I see with that one is that there can be confusion with the father, and that their life can kind of feel like this kind of worthless, nihilistic, unless they really find a higher meaning, it can feel like they're just kind of walking in this useless cycle. So Yeah. Then the Uranus sun is very different. Um, what that does, that makes it so one has like a very, very, very special life purpose. They're very rebellious, so you have to watch out for, for being like rebellious, like where you're literally just being rebellious for the sake of being rebellious. Um, but a lot of these things come from childhood, right? Like having Neptune and Uranus in the fourth, sometimes so like one of the really important things with Neptune in the fourth is like there's a need to be very realistic about the childhood because people with that they can literally like not remember their childhood, or they can remember their childhood as being better than it actually was or worse than it actually was. And I've heard a lot of people who actually physically cannot remember so much of their childhood. So really coming to terms with that, not over idealizing anything, is very key. With Uranus, um, a lot of times it speaks to someone who had like usually had to like because it'd be in the third house in Placidus, but like fourth house, like someone who a lot of times like had to like move around a lot. Maybe their parents got divorced. I said they sextile, but still I've seen sun moon trine, sun moon sextile, parents divorced, but like or just had like a kind of like unusual upbringing, like bohemian or yeah, just like surprising, exciting, unconventional in some way. But um, in the third house, it could be speaking to the early upbringing being that way, or it could be speaking to their sort of communication, like having great gifts through writing or through communicating and being able to really do that. And it can also speak to siblings and there being some issues there. Um, yeah, it can be a lot of things, right? But um, the aspects which are the most important, very yeah, like to the sun, with Uranus. I mean, like I said, with Neptune, it's really important to know who you are, right? So to have what I call the um, personal act of identity. Okay, it's not what I call it. What do I call it? I call it fuck. I had a name. Like, Esmond, stop! Don't scratch my sandals. Bad girl. Um, it's almost like a personal um constitution of self, right? It's almost like a country has a constitution. It's like having one for yourself of your morals and your values. So, and being very, very mindful, of like, so like when you spend time alone, you're able to like know how you're being influenced. That just makes the importance of mindfulness more, and just not believing anything you hear. Really going and looking for lots of perspectives about different, whether it's like the media or whatever, and just also not believing things like really like talking to lots of people and really testing out different sources of information. That's huge. Um, yeah, with Uranus, it's like sometimes like people like it takes them to like like it can take them to like 50, 52 to really like find like it's not that they don't find their purpose, but like they have like a very big picture purpose, and it's very like I said, it's very unique, and they can be very, very rebellious, and it can make some like the main thing is like if you're being rebellious, it's to not be rebellious just for the sake of being rebellious, right? It's because sometimes they can come up like in families where they just really wanted to just get out, and like be their own person and not be tied to anything. And sometimes they can just like uh go too far, as I was saying, like for the sake of like showing themselves as individuals. And when there's like an objective good and objective bad, like, and sometimes it can be like too many risks, unnecessary risks. There are bad risks, but when it's integrated, it creates someone who is their own person and who, you know, is unique and is happy because they have found a lane for themselves in life that really matches with what they want to do. Then Chiron, so it's a T square that shoots out in Libra, close to the ascendant. The Chiron square sun would just speak to like, just it would go back to that kind of feeling of like, there can be like a certain level of like insecurity of just feeling misunderstood, you know, and it goes back to the family, usually the father in that case. Um, and just really, really, need to heal any energy around both relationships, right? But Sun square Chiron on a psychological level, it's just, that there's a lot, there's a lot of wounds that come from the family. Like I said, Chiron Cancer, they get in the way of that Aries sun, that fiery Aries sun fully lighting up, right? So yeah. Um, let's see. Yeah, so yeah, Mercury being retrograde, when Mercury's in retrograde for all of us, you'll feel a lot more at ease, unlike most people. So those are times of actually like really good reflection and they're actually good times for someone like you to start things because you have it natally. And you can receive good news during those periods, learn. Well, for most people, it's not the best. For you, it is very good. Um, and yeah, it's just really about going within and like I said, like really, really writing it, like figuring out, reprogramming the mind and realizing the only thing that's getting in your way is yourself, right? And any of those like self-limiting beliefs and thought processes that kind of counteract and push one away. They can also just kind of like limit one, like be very rigid, overly rigid thinking, like or just different like way of thinking that's just like not complementary to full expansion, right? Um, so Neptune being with your North Node, it's like that's asking you to really, through service or whatever it is that you do, to feel to come in touch with like ultimate compassion and oneness. Um, so your moon being in the fifth, your sun, okay, yes, your moon being in the fifth gives you like an emotional need for authentic self-expression. Um, and the fact that Saturn's there means that like your Saturn return, which you know, I guess recently just ended not too long ago, is most likely when you probably until then with Saturn in the fifth house, it can feel like there's like this. The moon really wants you to take creative risks. It wants you to like really figure out different ways to be creative. Um, but then Saturn can kind of prohibit that and can make someone like, but also what it can do in the fifth house is that it can make one try to find like, it can make someone too serious about things related to play. and it can be really difficult because like, play is really important. And with Pluto square moon, a lot of times people can, have grown up too fast because of different traumas that can occur, different power struggles that can be at play, you know. So it's really another big key to, go back in childhood with North Node on the IC. It's like, go back and re-become a kid, re-become in touch with the inner child. And that's what the moon is asking for with Saturn in the fifth house. There's this big need for you to like take creative risks. But like, yeah, like the fifth house Saturn people can also be the types of people that turn their play into their work, right? They can like almost organize what's fun for them and make it like what they do for their work, which is obviously the best thing possible. Um, so Mercury, yeah, it's only barely in a conjunction with the sun, and that's an aspect, and then Mars and Venus are an aspect, which is crazy, crazy, crazy. Venus is opposite Pluto, in my opinion, though, so I wouldn't give it that. But yeah, so Venus opposite Pluto is a difficult one. It's not like a really tight orb, meaning it's not like such a close one. However, people with that, they can, until they reach a certain level of I guess self-love, they tend to attract very dark relationships. Um, and it's really just a projection of where their relationships and are ultimately like a projection of where they are at, because at its worst, that one can be like the ultimate like self-hate. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying it can create feelings of like real, like especially with the moon squaring Pluto too and Venus, like that can really make it's really, really important to, to help to have self-compassion, to really work on that all the time. And when you lack mutables like you do, it's really important to learn to go with the flow in life, right? And not be like overly, controlled. Um, so let's see. Let's see here. But yeah, eighth house Venus is opposite Pluto. It's like very much like soulmate or nothing type energy. And like having it in Taurus will make you wanna, make you love nature. It'll make it's a very good place to it'll make you very like attractive. People will be very attracted to your aura. And then it kind of mixes like this intensity with this calmness, with this serenity. Um, so that's a nice, interesting one. But yeah, like I can't stress enough that Venus opposite Pluto, like people with that square opposition, they will continue to repeat a certain cycle with very, very dark types until they they really, really decide like, okay, I'm done with this. And then, everything changes. I have Venus square Pluto, so I know all about it. Um, so more about love, like you have Juno, on the IC in Cap. So, that with the Venus in Taurus is speaking to like just the importance of partners being consistent, and about the idea of building foundations in relationships, right? Because Capricorn Juno, it's like your ideal partner. Fourth house, it's like someone who wants to build a family, someone who, whenever I see Juno fourth house, like I think of like a person who, on a metaphoric level, and also one thing about Mercury retrograde is that you may do better with like metaphors, right? Like that might be like things that work very well. Um, and that kind of, and like just like anything creative and artistic, poetry, like yeah, the right brain. It's really important to have like outlets for the right brain. But yeah, like it's just like, yeah, the idea of like foundations and relationships, right? The importance of it, it's not much of a risk taker, right? Because the eighth house, it's like, let's build something that really lasts and that's very deep and transformative. Not much time for bullshit. But then the moon in Aquarius in love is like, I need space. I need to still keep my own individuality within a relationship, or I'm not interested, or because it can start to feel like a prison. Um, Aquarius is, they like the freedom, right? So second house Pluto. Yeah, I definitely think like, someone who this is chart of someone who, is interested in, it's that mix of like real solidity. Where's your thing? Solidity in relationships, um, consistency, someone who like, says what they do and does what they say. And but also freedom, like because like as a Aries, it's really important to keep your in Aries, being the seventh house, it's really important to, yeah, so like, and then the Aquarius and Aries are both agree with that it's important to keep, to be like a free spirit and to be adventurous and to be independent and to not be one of those people that gets in a relationship and completely loses themselves. So Aquarius moons, yeah, they want to like have that, you know, have space and have their life. Partner has their life. Of course, like Libra rising, right? Um, having speaker rising is just like an amazing placement because it's just like very, very good for all things in life, right? Intelligence, wealth, just worldliness, class. It just gives like it's very good for appearance and um, esoteric knowledge. It's very elegant. Elegant, charming, whatever words you want to use. So, but like of course, like Libra risings, like they do tend to go towards relationships. So seventh house sun also. So I'm not saying that because your sun is in the seventh house, partnerships, relationships, those are very important. It's just about choosing the right ones. Um, and yeah, there needs to be like a real solid level of communication. Obviously, is a Mercury retrograde natal. Um, that there's a distinct way of communicating for people with that, right? So definitely, with Mercury being on the descendant, there needs to be that kind of like intuitive ability to communicate and understand each other. Um, because, like with all the misunderstood stuff I talked about, like with your family, like the last thing you want is a relationship where that kind of happens. And I'm not saying that like, like there's some negative thing with your parents because like, like these are just energies, right? Like, and sometimes these reflect, everyone feels things differently, like, and there is like that nice trine and sextile, but like, there's mostly hard aspects. So like, if I were to guess, right, but it's always difficult to tell. I would say that the parents would be more likely to have a good relationship with themselves, with one another, but then like at least having had some difficulty with you. But like there could be like lots of love, right? It could just be like, just lots of love, but just things that kind of like, um, yeah, just difficult, being very different types of people. Maybe they're more conservative, and you always have like more um, open views. Who knows? So, um, yeah, with the Venus Pluto, the key is to to do the shadow work. To really do the shadow work around self-love and truly valuing yourself. And that is when everything opens up. And then, and then your eighth house, Venus becomes an asset, right? Where it's very romantic and very much about two souls, like the idea of like, two souls coming together, forming one, like very, very, very intimate energy for Venus eighth house. And also it gives you very like, lots of gifts when it comes to the esoteric, the occult, and understanding human psychology and what makes things work beneath the surface. So Jupiter in the 11th also on the midheaven, that's going to make, well, it's close to midheaven, but still, that's definitely going to give lots of like good energy for career, but also it's very good for popularity and for money also in the 11th house. And also it's very good for inheritance to have eighth house Venus, like, or just, or marrying rich, or just, benefiting from other people's money. So yeah, that's really good. But what's very interesting is you have Pluto in the second, and that is on a karmic level. It can make someone feel, even if they have tons of money, like it comes from actually having past life spent on survival mode, in survival mode. So when that's the case, one can like the more emotional spiritual growth has been sidelined, right? So it can just create all kinds of difficulties. If you just, you just have to like imagine um different past lives where, like when I think about that, I just imagine like the individual like being very poor, and like I think of like a homeless person who, you know obviously, like being homeless, you're not thinking about you know your moon and square Pluto, or like, you're just trying to survive. So sometimes people with that, they can really, even if they make a ton of money, like they have to watch out not to be workaholics. They have to really like, but it can make people like huge, but they can really make people like real go-getters, people who want to make a ton of money. And then even when they get it, they can feel like a fear. So they have to get past this fear, like, because like they can become rich. A lot of times they don't come from money, but it's different. It's not. I don't know. That's what I've observed, but I've also seen them. I've seen different things with that one, so I wouldn't put that statement as a blanket statement. But um, you know, like there's just a difficulty, right, in terms of not overworking themselves. So there's a lot of times there's a lot of fears around finances, around running out, that comes from past lives of not having. So you know um and like even that can be seen. Never mind. So you know even, well, yeah, with Chiron in the 10th, or in the 10th, like a lot of times also there can be a fear of like putting oneself out into the public, which could come from like, different things that like, if one has like any like embarrassment, like, or shame that came when they put, from early life, like, let's say like something happened at school where they got embarrassed or something when they're growing up, like it can kind of make one afraid of letting themselves kind of be. So overcoming that is a big part. Um, and yeah, the 10th house Mars also is like also pointing to someone that'll work very, very hard, be ninth in Placidus. So that would like, speak more about like, the quest towards knowledge, to, towards like truth being huge, but also like in whole sign, what I do, or, it's about just creates a hustler, and Cancer also can be very much about money, right? And midheaven at 24 Cancer, that could be real estate. You never know. Um, So, but it could also be like, you know, a career in something that's very healing or something that just makes people feel comfortable. Um, so I also think that like work-wise, like networking would probably be, I just think communicating and like I can see you being like an excellent writer and very good communicator. Um, Even though you do have the Mercury retrograde, I think that it definitely gets better with age. There can be some awkwardness, there can be some over analyzing, overthinking, but like you know, you have it in Aries, right? So Aries Mercury can sometimes be a little bit too like boom, boom, boom. So the retrograde can kind of like slow it down and make it less like, you know, not so gnarly, like just bolting things out all the time kind of thing. Um, Also Jupiter and Leo is like it's very good for what we were talking about earlier about like the need to like be creative and like be the inner child. Um, yeah, and it also makes it so like Jupiter and Leo people love kids, and they almost like they always have this very gregarious kind of way of being, and they're very inspirational leaders a lot of time. And in 11th house, you could be like, leader of a group of people, especially like with what we said about, another thing about the Uranus with the sun is that your destiny can be linked to, something humanitarian and Aquarius moon as well, and something like working with groups of people with common cause. So, Jupiter will give you a lot of luck and like really, really wanting to expand through groups, through friends, all that. Getting lucky with friends also. Um, and yeah, Black Moon. Okay, so you're definitely at your flow state when you're able to really like hit your stride, like when it comes to like um bringing together the higher and the lower mind, right? Gemini and Sag, that is massive. Um, so the way you do that, one second, is that Gemini represents third house, part of fortune, right? And Sag, it's just about being flexible and not just believing, like always being open to being wrong and to adding and updating your version of truth. So a lot of people like, they know a lot, but they just think automatically like, okay, what I know is it. I'm not willing to wiggle, right? And when they get in an argument with someone, they start to think instead of thinking about like, okay, like, that's interesting. Like, maybe I can like maybe this can teach me something new, you know. Um, they can think more like along the lines of, okay, like how do I prove to this guy or this girl that I'm right? So, Gemini in this case is um it's the journalist, right? It's the idea of going out in the world and collecting information. And then the analysis thereof is Sag. The idea of bringing that information together is Sag. And of creating truths out of that information, that's Sag. So you see you could probably imagine how there needs to be like a good balance of the two, right? Because if there's too much Gemini, there's not enough deep reflection and there can be too much scatteredness, right? Gemini third house interchangeable, right? The terms. And if there's too much Sag, there can be like too much of like a going out in the world and just believing whatever, you know, like just believing something but not really challenging it. So what's interesting is that your Black Moon Lilith is also in stats, right? So that's like you at your lowest vibration. It's how you kind of, you know, we each as humans have a way where we kind of defeat ourselves, right? So Black Moon Lilith in Sag is some, it's just the need to kind of watch out for that potential to do that very thing I was just talking about of being inflexible when it comes, or just like, dogmatism, right? So, and in the third, yeah. So it's just really speaking to kind of that message I was giving you before about the need to have that balance in that. Um, because sometimes people can, like, yeah, they can just be, way too scattered with like, oh, I want to focus on this, I want to start this, I want to start that, and it's better to, like, to kind of focus on, like Sagittarius is the arrow, right? So it's shown by an arrow, and that arrow represents kind of like a single pointed truth, right? A single pointed quest towards truth. So it's like the idea that you get further by focusing on one or a few things than just constantly switching up. Um, and sometimes what can happen is, yeah, it's that very thing I said, right? Where it's like just always having the idea, like, what I know is never enough, like people like Joe Rogan is someone that just comes to my mind, because I try to do this too, right? I always try to think like, um as a Sag moon, right? I always try to think like, um you know I always try to have the mindset of I know nothing, because the second you think like, the second that you become satisfied with your level of wisdom or knowledge or whatever, like, there's always more, and there's always different perspectives, and it's also a really big part of that is knowing that there can be multiple truths for multiple people. Yes, truth, there's an objective truth, but there's also truth, is subjective also, in the sense of one's own experience. So it's valuing in one's like the environment they grew up in, one's experiences, right? So just being able to really see that, and that's massive. So then having Sirius uh in Libra, really feeling nurtured, like relationship wise, like when you're in very balanced relationships, um that's massive. And relationships where it's fair, right? And Sirius first house, it gives like this very, like, kind of grounding, kind of like very comforting energy to the person, right? Because of where very warm nature have that rising. But you have to, like, make sure that, like, that you're not giving too much, right? Like the ratio of, like, giving and receiving is even. And yeah, like Sirius and Libra just loves, like, atmospheres of peace and peace, balance, fairness, and just cooperation, and yeah. And having Pallas and Virgo in the 12th is interesting, because Pallas in the 12th is a very open third eye, very open to spiritual teachings, a real innate ability to, like, communicate and understand them. But then the Pallas in Virgo is like you know, a mind that's very analytical and good at like piecing things together, um, details and stuff like that, like being good at like discriminating. So having like, you know, good logic. So it works well with a lot, you know, with the Neptune square for sure, and the Mercury retrograde. Um, and yeah, another thing with the Mercury in the nodes is like, you know, like making sure that there can be a tendency to like, you know, to talk rather than to act, right? So yeah, it's really asking like, yeah, that whole thing about like not scattering the energy and really putting the communication skills to like a very strong use in this lifetime. And you know, the Sun square node also a lot of people with that, they, you know, they're meant to take like a very different path, like a very solo path in life that's different than mom, different than dad. They don't necessarily like have like a very strong guide in that sense, right? And always remembering that the moon square Pluto like will swing one back like these very kind of like you know, there can be like lots of emotional dramas and like lots of back and forth energy with the and with the emotions. So it's like all about like that channeling that intensity into like something creative, some pursuit that you really care about. Um, because life can be, you know, pretty hectic early on with that. Um, and then with the Uranus one, kind of just like going back over some of these main aspects, it's like um you know, yeah, it just makes, like I said, you want to do things your own way. Um, and you know, it makes some, yeah, it's just like that path towards individualization, right? But being able to take other people's input is important, I think, with that one. So yeah, and one other thing about like the Sun square Neptune is that you can really be so like you can feel the suffering of the world on such a deep level, right? Makes you a great healer. Um, So it's really another great one for like, you know, like the idea, like I always say, like Neptune rules cameras, so you can like um, film yourself and like do like daily vlogs or look at or talk in the mirror. These are things Neptune rules mirrors and cameras. So that's a way to really get to understand the self more. And any kind of like creative outlets, journaling, all that stuff is really good. And just making sure that you know you have sufficient alone time to really process things, right? So let me see one thing over here. So yeah, yeah. So like with an aspect in Mars, sometimes it can be like it can activate, like it can make someone like quick tempered and like a little bit like just like acting before they're thinking. So it's really, once again, mindfulness is very important because with the moon square Pluto, sometimes one can act from a very unconscious place. So it's a really pushes one the need towards the need to like really handle everything that's, you know, see things beneath the surface, right? So then aspect of Mars is like, you know, your assertiveness, your action tendencies. So it can make one kind of, you know, impulsive and sometimes like, you know, quick to act sometimes. So, you know, with same thing with the Sun square Uranus, right? So it's really important to have like a physical outlet to, you know, Mika. And and then also Jupiter opposite Saturn. When I see that, I think of like this you know, just like this pull between like one part that wants to expand, one part that wants to be more restrictive. Um, And it's really about blending the energies of being responsible, and yeah, being responsible and all about honor, and then also, you know, expansive and taking healthy risks, right? And learning, higher wisdom, all that. And yeah, it's really through like, through like all these little, communications and this curiosity about the world that everything opens up, the ability to just have like lots of conversations with different people. Invest in the ninth, it's like, very focused, lots of energy towards discovering the higher truth, higher meaning of life, right? So it's just goes back to what I was saying, right? Someone who wants to like share what they learn, but also understand that like you can't, force someone um to, adapt your way of thinking. And I know how it is. Um, when you go and you spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, like learning and acquiring wisdom, you want people you love to also benefit from it. And like, yeah, and also like back to Aquarius Moon and Gemini Vesta, it's like it goes back to that potential for intellectualizing emotions, right? And the need to really feel them. But Vesta Gemini is really good for writing too. Really good for writing, communicating, and yeah, and that can really open up like the doorway to higher awareness and to higher truth. So yeah, once again, the North Node being on the IC, it's a very big indicator of someone who is meant to, once again, um, break this kind of karmic karmic cycles in the family. Let's see here. Okay, speak us in mid-heaven. Hecate of Jupiter. So Hecate is like one of the witch asteroids. So like witch, could be anything occult, it could be anything, you know, um, related to anything esoteric, anything occult, whatever it is, right? There can be like lots of expansion the more that you dive into different esoteric and occult types of teachings, right? And really discovering the real truth to all that is. Let's mm, mm, mm. You can put this one in. Yeah, so you have like a lot of like these really like amazing like very transformational fixed stars, very magical ones. Algol on Venus, super intuitive, real ability to kind of like, you know, like it's very linked to artists, especially with Venus. So like the Venus algol definitely can bring out the more positive side of it. It's known as like a very difficult, star, but having Venus brings out kind of the more like transformational element of it. So, we've seen that with Hecate and seeing a theme here. And yeah, like Spica rising is just like very good fortune, and one of the best, right? It can create fame. Someone who's like self-taught, great learning abilities, great reasoning abilities, great virtue. Um, very, very spiritual, into the mysteries of life. And it's just like one of those energies that you feel like very assisted by spirit. Um, I always think of Spica as like the star that's like the lonely one. Sometimes like it is very charming and all that, but sometimes you know it's like the star itself. It can you know make one feel like they're a little bit different, but it's not a bad thing. It's very attractive to people. And then you have Pollux, right? Which is on your midheaven, right? Which is very good for success in business and kind of whatever one does for a career, kind of a go-getter energy. Good for sports too. The Mars ruled one. Let's see here. No. Yeah, so you have Hecate in and Circe on your Jupiter. So those are two of the three like asteroids that are associated with, witch energy, right? So ceremonies and herbs and all that stuff, like Reiki, whatever it is, can be areas of life, that you have natural skills in. And the fact that the North Node's with Neptune kind of brings that all together. And it makes one really want to have a contribution to humanity. Like of course it's like, it starts by going like the real inner journey, then mimicking the outer journey and the Dharma. I definitely see this as like a chart of someone who's here to help the world. By helping themselves, they're able to help others. And like there's all of these talents that, get activated through the more work that you do, right? And as I always say, when there's very tough aspects to the sun, the moon and the sun, the first, till the Saturn return, like it's really important to not take shame from that, because like all that stuff, whatever happened, was meant to happen, right? And a lot of people, what can happen is that take my nicotine. What can happen is that lots of like baggage in the first 30 years or so, shame, guilt, especially with the moon square Pluto, like the potential for like taking on energies. Like when I tell people about like moon square Neptune or square Pluto, I ask them, I say, okay, so what from your mother or like whoever like the moon parent is, you can even look at both, like, what have you potentially taken on that's not yours, right? And like really, really think deeply about it. Like, what have you taken from both parents, right? Because some people say like nothing. I'm so different. But if you actually like look at it, there's always things. Like in my book, I wrote about that, and I didn't know any of these things until I started writing about it, and then like a lot was discovered through that. So yeah, it's a powerful exercise. Let's see one thing. Oh, nice. And you have a mystic rectangle between Venus with Algol, um, Chiron slash midheaven, and then Pluto and Neptune. The Neptune one, it's like 10 degrees, so it's not like tight with the Venus, but still, the mystic rectangles, it's like, it is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's this ability to have these, especially with Pluto and Neptune involved and Chiron and Venus, it's like, um, real mystical potential. And we've seen that all over your chart. You can watch readings I post and see, like, because like sometimes I think sometimes like I need to tell people, like, because like it could maybe sound like this is something that I would tell everyone, but it's not, you know. And then with the the T square between, where Sun's at the apex with Chiron squaring Sun, then Sun squaring Neptune in Neptune and Uranus shooting out in the first house, it's really showing how the resolution of everything is through this. Well, of course, the thing with the Neptune square, the nodes with really like the beliefs that one has about themselves and what they can, achieve, and different kind of like thought processes that might be passed over from lifetime to lifetime. Um, that's huge. But then, first house being where the T square shoots out is ultimately speaking to 1 second actually. Yeah, it's ultimately speaking to how by really delving into your own, like really finding balance, in your kind of relationship with yourself, and just with that whole Libra Aries archetype of, finding the right types of relationships and partnerships, that have that kind of blend of like, you know, the Uranian aspect, the more freedom, keeping your own self while also having that in that independence, but also having that closeness and that security. It's really important. Here's Esme again. Mm-hmm. And yeah, as an Aquarius moon, that's the humanitarian. That's the person who is here during this age of Aquarius to make a difference. And like I said, with the Sun square Uranus, there can be lots of trial and error, when it comes to finding that true purpose, right? And there can be various purposes throughout the life. Um, but it's definitely something that's quite unique. And I would just say, continue to explore, continue to be open to endless possibilities, because that's what I see in this chart. Doesn't stop it. Don't touch my crystal. Don't follow it. Anyway, yeah, so your Mars is out of bounds too. So yeah, it's like you have this real, like that Mars in Cancer, like this real, you know, it makes someone really want to like help the world, and gives that endless compassion, fighting for causes they believe in, very protective of the family. But sometimes the thing with Mars and Cancer also is that when they get hurt, they can kind of like be like the crab that crawls into the shell and is afraid to trust again. So it's really important to kind of like, learning, being vulnerable, and leaning into that South Node in Cancer in the right way, which is about being able to express the emotions and really deal with those at the core level. Because with the Pluto square, the moon, that's extremely important. And sometimes, as I said, the Aquarius moons, like they can be, yeah, intellectualized emotions. Yeah, super interesting stuff. So, let me see one thing. Esme. Yeah, so I see that you did not, that you just got the reading. So, what I tell people, most people, what they do is they get the reading and then they want to add the follow-up and the current astrology. So I give you a big discount on that if you're interested. It's not like a long wait like this one. It's just, once you've taken in everything from the reading, no pressure, obviously. This is a reading, the natal chart you get done once, it's done, that's it, doesn't change. It's all possibilities, but the follow up is an hour where we talk about this. We compare your lived experience to what I said in the reading. Obviously, like the chart is the interplay of free will and the chart. Charts is a deck of cards you were dealt, and your free will is ultimately what you do with it, right? And then after that, we move into the current astrology, which is like the astrology, your personal astrology, like the year ahead, right? Understanding like how you can literally, like, if you have like an intense um transit, like I do everything: solar return, transit, progression, solar arc, house ingress, progress, lunar cycle, all these things that kind of show where the individual's at, and what to expect ahead in terms of like the astrological weather. I don't say you're going to meet someone in this month, but um I really give like we talk, and it ends up being like a 3 hour session usually. First hour is the follow up, next two are the current. So let me know if you're interested. I give you a big discount for that if you wanted to do that. And besides that, thank you very much, and talk to you later. Ciao.